Hey guys, okay, so I'm going to read to you this lovely story. Where are you going? Where have you been? Now, obviously, you guys can read on your own. You can read along with me. I don't care. Or you've read it already. When I'm done reading it, I'm going to go over some things. So, I don't know, it might be helpful for your essay that's due Monday. It might not. I have no idea. I'm going to hope so. Also, I'll probably fidget a lot because, well, I get uncomfortable. So, I don't know, just for comfort. I am sitting on my couch trying to do this. So, just so we know, this was written and taking place like back in the 60s, 70s. So things are a little more lackadaisical. People aren't locking their doors all the time because, well, there's really no need to. Serial killers were just emerging. Okay, gives you a little hint. I'm also a little punch drunk. I'm not drunk. I'm just punch drunk. I'm a little tired. So my wit is astounding at the moment. I'm going to be breaking some things up as well to help you guys out with some deeper meanings. Joyce Carol Oates does a really good job of, putting those messages in that you have to read between the lines to get. And I know my first time reading this, I didn't pick it up. I read this many moons ago, probably 15 years ago. And it was over my head, as it should have been, because 15 years ago I was only 16. So it should have been over my damn head. But as I've continued to read it over and over, I've picked up even more meaning to it. So it's a good read. It's an interesting read. It's not a happy read, so I apologize for that. But yeah, so as I said, I'm going to be stopping a few times just to go over some things to make sure that, you're clear on what Oates meant on certain things. I will do my very best not to read too quickly, but sometimes I can't help myself. So I'm going to try not to yawn. Like I said, I'm incredibly tired. Okay, so where are you going? Where have you been? Her name was Connie. She was 15, and she had a quick, nervous, giggling habit of craning her neck to glance into mirrors or checking other people's faces to make sure her own was all right. Her mother, who noticed everything and knew everything, and who hadn't much reason any longer to look at her own face, always scolded Connie about it. "Stop gawking at yourself. Who are you? You think you're so pretty," she would say. Connie would raise her eyebrows at these familiar old complaints and look right through her mother into a shadowy vision of herself as she was right at that moment. She knew she was pretty, and that was everything. Her mother had been pretty once too, if you could believe those old snapshots in the album, but now her looks were gone, and that was why she was always after Connie. "Why don't you keep your room clean like your sister? How have you got your hair fixed? What the hell stinks? Hairspray? You don't see your sister using that junk." Her sister June was 24 and still lived at home. Wish I did. She was a secretary in the high school Connie attended, and if that wasn't bad enough with her in the same building, she was so plain and chunky and steady that Connie had to hear her praised all the time by her mother and her mother's sisters. June did this, June did that. She saved money and helped clean the house and cooked, and Connie couldn't do a thing. Her mind was filled with trashy daydreams. Their father was away at work most of the time, and when he came home, he wanted supper, and he read the newspaper at supper, and after supper, he went to bed. He didn't bother talking much to them, but around his bent head, Connie's mother kept picking at her until Connie wished her mother was dead, and she herself was dead, and it was all over. "She makes me want to throw up sometimes," she complained to her friends. She had a high, breathless, amused voice that made everything she said sound a little forced, whether it was sincere or not. There was one good thing. June went places with her girlfriends of hers, girls who were just as plain and steady as she, and so when Connie wanted to do that, her mother had no objections. The father of Connie's best girlfriend drove the girls the 3 miles to town and left them at the shopping plaza so they could walk through the stores or go to a movie, and when he came to pick them up again at 11, he never bothered to ask what they had done. Sounds good, right? They must have been familiar sights walking around the shopping plaza in their shorts and flat ballerina slippers and always scuffed the sidewalk with charm bracelets jingling on their thin wrists. They would lean together to whisper and laugh secretly if someone passed who amused or interested them. Connie had long, dark blonde hair that drew anyone's eye to it, and she wore part of it pulled up on her head and puffed out, and the rest of it she let fall down her back. She wore a pullover jersey blouse that looked one way when she was at home and another way when she was away from home. Everything about her had two sides to it, one for home and one for anywhere that was not home. Her walk, which could be childlike bobbing or languid enough to make anyone think she was hearing music in her head. Her mouth, which was pale and smirking most of the time, but bright and pink on these evenings out. Her laugh, which was cynical and drawling at home. Haha, very funny. But high-pitched and nervous anywhere else, like the jingling of the charms of her bracelet. It's very important that she has two sides, not the jingling. Sometimes they did go shopping or to a movie, but sometimes they went across the highway, ducking fast across the busy road to a drive-in restaurant where older kids hung out. The restaurant was shaped like a big bottle, though squatter than a real bottle, and on its cap it was a revolving figure of a grinning boy holding a hamburger aloft. So like Burger Boy from Austin Powers. One night in midsummer, they ran across, breathless with daring, and right away someone leaned out a car window and invited them over. But it was just a boy from high school they didn't like. It made them feel good to be able to ignore him. They went up through the maze of parked and cruising cars to the bright-lit, fly-infested restaurant, their faces pleased and expectant as if they were entering a sacred building that loomed up out of the night to give them what haven and blessing they yearned for. They sat at the counter and crossed their legs at their ankles, their thin shoulders rigid with excitement, and listened to the music that made everything so good. The music was always in the background. That's important. Like music at a church service. It was something to depend on. That's it. A boy named Eddie came in to talk with them. He sat backwards on his stool, turning himself jerkily around in semicircles, and then stopping and turning back again. And after a while, he asked Connie if she would like something to eat. She said she would, and so she tapped her friend's arm on her way out. Her friend pulled her face up into a brave, droll look, and Connie said she would meet her at 11 across the way. I just hate to leave her like that, Connie said earnestly, but the boy said that she wouldn't be alone for long. So they went out to his car, and on the way, Connie couldn't help but let her eyes wander over the windshields and faces all around her, her face gleaming with a joy that had nothing to do with Eddie or even this place. It might have been the music. She drew her shoulders up and sucked in her breath with the pure pleasure of being alive, and just at that moment, she happened to glance at a face just a few feet from hers. It was a boy with shaggy black hair and a convertible jalopy painted gold. He stared at her, and then his lips widened into a grin. Connie slid her eyes at him and turned away, but she couldn't help glancing back, and there he was, still watching her. He wagged a finger and laughed, "Gonna get you, baby," and Connie turned away without Eddie noticing anything. She spent 3 hours with him at the restaurant where they ate hamburgers and drank Cokes in wax cups that were always sweating, and then down an alley a mile or so away. When he left her off at 5 to 11, only the movie house was still open at the plaza. Her girlfriend was there, talking with the boy. When Connie came up, the two girls smiled at each other, and Connie said, "How was the movie?" And the girl said, "You should know." They rode off with the girl's father, sleepy and pleased, and Connie couldn't help but look back at the darkened shopping plaza with its big empty parking lot and its signs that were faded and ghostly now, and over at the drive-in restaurant where cars were still circling tirelessly. She couldn't hear the music at this distance. Next morning, June asked her how the movie was, and Connie said, so-so. So I'm going to stop just so that we know. Connie was in the alleyway with Eddie having sex. I know. Scandalous. And we continue. Oh, and the girl was too, the friend. She was also with some boy having sex. Okay, so, and we carry on. She and that girl and occasionally another girl went out several times a week, and the rest of the time Connie spent around the house. It was summer vacation, getting in her mother's way and thinking, dreaming about the boys she met. But all the boys fell back and dissolved into a single face that was not even a face, but an idea, a feeling, mixed up with the urgent, insistent pounding of the music and the humid night air of July. Connie's mother kept dragging her back to the daylight by finding things for her to do or saying suddenly, "What's this about the Pettinger girl?" And Connie would nervously say, "Oh, her, that dope?" She always drew thick, clear lines between herself and such girls, and her mother was simple and kind enough to believe it. Her mother was so simple, Connie thought, that it was maybe cruel to fool her so much. Her mother went scuffing around the house in old bedroom slippers and complained over the telephone to one sister about the other. Then the other called up, and the two of them complained about the third one. If June's name was mentioned, her mother's tone was approving, and if Connie's name was mentioned, it was disapproving. This did not really mean she disliked Connie, and actually, Connie thought that her mother preferred her to June just because she was prettier. But the two of them kept up a pretense of exasperation, a sense that they were tugging and struggling over something of little value to either of them. Sometimes over coffee, they were almost friends. But something would come up, some vexation that was like a fly buzzing suddenly around their heads, and their faces went hard with contempt. So as you can tell, Connie is very vain. One Sunday, Connie got up at 11. None of them bothered with church, and washed her hair so that it could dry all day long in the sun. Her parents and sister were going to a barbecue at an aunt's house, and Connie said no, she wasn't interested, rolling her eyes to let her mother know just what she thought of it. Stay home alone then, her mother said sharply. Connie sat out back in the lawn chair and watched them drive away. Her father, quiet and bald, hunched around so that he could back the car out. Her mother with a look that was still angry and not at all softened through the windshield. And in the back seat, poor old June, all dressed up as if she didn't know what a barbecue was. All the running kids and yelling flies. Connie sat with her eyes closed in the sun, dreaming and dazed with the warmth about her, as if this were a kind of love, the caresses of love, and her mind slipped over into the thoughts of the boy she had been with the night before, and how nice he had been, how sweet it always was, not the way someone like June would suppose, but sweet, gentle, the way it was in movies and promised in songs. And when she opened her eyes, she hardly knew where she was. The backyard ran off into weeds and a fence-like line of trees, and behind it the sky was perfectly blue and still. The asbestos ranch house that was now 3 years old startled her. It looked small. She shook her head as if to get awake. That's another clip. It was too hot. She went inside the house and turned on the radio to drown out the quiet. She sat on the edge of her bed, barefoot, and listened for an hour and a half to a program called XYZ Sunday Jamboree, record after record of hard, fast, shrieking songs she sang along with, interspersed by exclamations from Bobby King and "Look here, you girls, that Napoleon, Son, and Charlie want you to pay real close attention to this song coming up." And Connie paid close attention herself, bathed in a glow of slow pulsed joy that seemed to rise mysteriously out of the music itself and lay languidly about the airless little room, breathed in and breathed out with each gentle rise and fall of her chest. Okay, I'm going to stop again. So that very, very short paragraph about her paying close attention to herself and how she's breathing deeply. So this has two different interpretations. Okay, so the one interpretation is one that will follow us through to the, actually, you know what? No, both interpretations will follow us through to the end of the story. Okay, that it's real or that it's a dream. Now, regardless of if it's real or a dream, one of the interpretations of that particular paragraph could be that this is Connie paying close attention to herself, is actually Connie masturbating. Joyce Carol Oates is very subtle with these ideas, okay? And this idea of sex and pleasure is going to come up again. All right, it's already come up before with Eddie in the alleyway, and now here's something about Connie and herself, okay? Or the other interpretation is that she's focused so hard on her breathing and just relaxing that she falls asleep, okay? Now, we continue. After a while, she heard a car coming up the drive. She sat up at once, startled because it couldn't be her father so soon. The gravel kept crunching all the way in from the road. The driveway was long. And Connie ran to the window. It was a car she didn't know. It was an open jalopy painted a bright gold that caught the sunlight opaquely. Her heart began to pound and her fingers snatched at her hair, checking it as she whispered, "Christ, Christ." Because, she's vain. Wondering how bad she looked, the car came to a stop at the side door and the horn sounded 4 short taps as if this were a signal Connie knew. She went into the kitchen and approached the door slowly, then hung out the screen door, her bare toes curling down off the step. There were 2 boys in the car, and now she recognized the driver. He had shaggy, shabby black hair that looked crazy as a wig, and he was grinning at her. That's important. "I ain't late, am I?" he said. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Connie said. Oh, told you I'd be out, didn't I? I don't even know who you are." She spoke sullenly, careful to show no interest or pleasure, and he spoke in a fast, bright monotone. Connie looked past him to the other boy, taking her time. He had fair brown hair with a lock that fell onto his forehead. His sideburns gave him a fierce, embarrassed look, but so far he hadn't bothered to glance at her. Both boys wore sunglasses. The driver's glasses were metallic and mirrored everything in miniature, like Ray-Bans. "You want to come for a ride?" he said. Connie smirked and let her hair fall loose over one shoulder. "Don't you like my car? New paint job," he said. "Hey." "What?" "You're cute." She pretended to fidget, chasing flies from the door. "Well, don't you believe me or what?" he said. "Look, I don't even know who you are," Connie said in disgust. "Hey, Ellie's got a radio. See, mine broke down." He lifted his friend's arm and showed her the little transistor radio the boy was holding, and now Connie began to hear the music. It was the same program that was playing inside the house. Bobby King? She said. I listen to him all the time. I think he's great. He's kind of great, Connie said reluctantly. Listen, the guy's great. He knows where the action is. Connie blushed a little because the glasses made it impossible for her to see just what this boy was looking at. She couldn't decide if she liked him or if he was just a jerk, and so she dawdled in the doorway and wouldn't come down or go back inside. She said, "What's all that stuff painted on your car?" "Well, can't you read it?" He opened the door very carefully, as if he were afraid it might fall off. He slid out just as carefully, planting his feet firmly on the ground, the tiny metallic world in his glasses slowing down like gelatin hardening, and in the midst of it, Connie's bright green blouse. "This here's my name to begin with," he said. Arnold Friend was written in tar-like black letters on the side with a drawing of a round, grinning face that reminded Connie of a pumpkin, except it wore glasses. "I want to introduce myself. I'm Arnold Friend, and that's my real name, and I'm going to be your friend, honey. And inside the car's Ellie Oscar. He's kind of shy." Ellie brought his transistor radio up to his shoulder and balanced it there. "Now these numbers are a secret code, honey," Arnold Friend explained. He read off the numbers. 33, 19, 17. These will come in. And raised his eyebrows at her to see what she thought of that, but she didn't think much of it. The left rear fender had been smashed, and around it was written, on the gleaming gold background, "Done by crazy woman driver." Connie had to laugh at that. Arnold Friend was pleased at her laughter and looked up at her. "Around the other side's a lot more. You want to come and see them?" "No." "Why not?" "Why should I?" "Don't you want to see what's on the car? Don't you want to go for a ride?" "I don't know. Why not?" "I got things to do." "Like what?" "Things." He laughed as if she had said something funny. He slapped his thighs. He was standing in a strange way, leaning back against the car as if he were balancing himself. He wasn't tall, only an inch or so taller than she would be if she came down to him. Connie liked the way he was dressed, which was the way all of them dressed, tight faded jeans stuffed into black scuffed boots, a belt that pulled his muscle in and showed how lean he was, and a white pullover shirt that was a little soiled and showed the hard, small muscles of his arms and shoulders. He looked as if he probably did hard work, lifting and carrying things. Even his neck looked muscular, and his face was a familiar face somehow. The jaw and chin and cheeks slightly darkened because he hadn't shaved for a day or two, and the nose long and hawk-like, sniffing as if she were a treat he was going to gobble up and it was all a joke. "Connie, you ain't telling the truth. This is your day set aside for a ride with me, and you know it," he said, still laughing. The way he straightened and recovered from his fit of laughing showed that it had all been fake. "How do you know what my name is?" she said suspiciously. "It's Connie." "Maybe. Maybe not." "I know my Connie," he said, wagging his finger. Now she remembered him even better, back at the restaurant, and her cheeks warmed at the thought of how she had sucked in her breath just at the moment she passed him, how she must have looked to him, and he had remembered her. "Ellie and I come out here especially for you," he said. "Ellie can sit in back. How about it?" "Where?" "Where what?" "Where are we going?" He looked at her. He took off the sunglasses, and she saw how pale the skin around his eyes was, like holes that were not in shadow, but instead in light. His eyes were like chips of broken glass that catch the light in an amiable way. He smiled. It was as if the idea of going for a ride somewhere to some place was a new idea to him. "Just for a ride, Connie, sweetheart." "I never said my name was Connie." So I'm going to stop again. So at this point, she's starting to get a little creeped out because she never introduced herself. He introduced himself, but never said, like, "Hey, what's your name?" He just knew it. And that's kind of creepy. I mean, just a little creepy. They don't have Facebook or Instagram or anything back then for us to just know people that we don't actually know. Okay, so also keep in mind, she has now said that his eyes are very pale and that it looks as if he was wearing a wig and that he has to balance on something. Okay, so these are also some clues. Okay, this is my favorite. Let's read on. "But I know what it is. I know your name and all about you. Lots of things," Arnold Friend said. He had not moved yet, but stood still, leaning back against the side of his jalopy. "I took special interest in you, such a pretty girl, and found out all about you. Like, I know your parents and sister are gone somewhere, and I know where and how long they're going to be gone. And I know who you were with last night. And your best friend's girl's name is Betty, right? Her best girlfriend's name, sorry." He spoke in a simple, lilting voice, exactly as if he were reciting the words to a song. His smile assured her that everything was fine. In the car, Ellie turned up the volume on his radio and did not bother to look around at them. "Ellie can sit in the back seat," Arnold Friend said. He indicated his friend with a casual jerk of his chin, as if Ellie did not count and she should not bother with him. How'd you find out all that stuff? Connie said. Listen, Betty Schultz and Tony Fitch and Jimmy Pettinger and Nancy Pettinger, he said in a chant, Raymond Stanley, Bob Hutter. Do you know all those kids? I know everybody. Look, you're kidding. You're not from around here. But how come we never saw you before? Oh, whoops, sorry. Sure. But how come we never saw you before? Sure you saw me before, he said. He looked down at his boots as if he were a little offended. You just don't remember. Yeah, I guess I'd remember you, Connie said. Yeah? Sorry. He looked at this, beaming. He was pleased. He began to mark time with the music from Ellie's radio, tapping his fists lightly together. Connie looked away from his smile to the car, which was painted so bright it almost hurt her eyes to look at. She looked at the name, Arnold Friend, and up at the front fender was an expression that was familiar. Man the flying saucers. It was an expression kids had used the year before but didn't use this year. She looked at it for a while as if the words meant something to her and she did not know yet. What are you thinking about, huh? Arnold Friend demanded. Not worried about your hair blowing around in my car, are you? No. Think I maybe can't drive good? How do I know? You're a hard girl to handle. How come? He said. Don't you know I'm your friend? Didn't you see me put my sign in the air when we walked by? What sign? Hey, are you listening to my story? You're an asshole. Fuck you. Why don't you join? I'm almost done. Obviously, you're intrigued. Sorry, asshole husband. What? I love you. Are you going to continue? This is where it gets good. How long has it been? Okay. All right. Well, now I'm off script. Jesus. I was doing great. Okay, love you. My sign. And he drew an X in the air, leaning out towards her. They were maybe 10 feet apart. After his hand fell back to his side, the X was still in the air, almost visible. Connie let the screen door close and stood perfectly still inside it, listening to the music from her radio and the boys blend together. She stared at Arnold Friend. He stood there so stiffly relaxed, pretending to be relaxed, with one hand idly on the door handle, as if he were keeping himself up that way and had no intention of ever moving again. She recognized most things about tight jeans that showed his thighs and buttocks, and the greasy leather boots, and the tight shirt, and even the slippery, friendly smile of his, that sleepy, dreamy smile that all the boys used to get across ideas they didn't want to put into words. She recognized all of this, and also the sing-song way he talked, slightly mocking, kidding, but serious and a little melancholy, and she recognized the way he tapped one fist against the other in homage to the perpetual music behind them. But all these things did not come together. She said suddenly, Hey, how old are you? His smile faded. She could see then that he wasn't a kid. He was much older. 30, maybe more. At this knowledge, her heart began to pound faster. If we remember, Connie is only 15. Well, that's a crazy thing to ask. Can't you see I'm your own age? Like hell you are. Maybe a couple years older. I'm 18. 18, she said doubtfully. He grinned to reassure her, and lines appeared at the corners of his mouth. His teeth were big and white. He grinned so broadly, his eyes became slits, and she saw how thick the lashes were, thick and black, as if painted with a black tar-like material. Then abruptly, he seemed to become embarrassed and looked over his shoulder at Ellie. He's crazy. He said, ain't he a riot? He's a nut, a real character. Ellie was still listening to the music. His sunglasses told nothing about what he was thinking. He wore a bright orange shirt unbuttoned halfway to show his chest, which was a pale bluish chest and not muscular like Arnold Friend's. His shirt collar was turned up all around him, and the very tips of the collar pointed out past his chin, as if they were protecting him. He was pressing the transistor radio up against his ear and sat there in a kind of daze, right in the sun. He's kind of strange, Connie said. Hey, she says you're kind of strange, Arnold Friend cried. He pounded on the car to get Ellie's attention. Ellie turned for the first time, and Connie saw with shock that he wasn't a kid either. He had a fair, hairless face, cheeks reddened slightly as if the veins grew too close to the surface of his skin, the face of a 40-year-old baby. Connie felt a wave of dizziness rising at this sight, and she stared at him as if waiting for something to change the shock of the moment, make it all right again. Ellie's lips kept shaping words, mumbling along with the words blasting in his ear. Maybe you two better go away, Connie said faintly. What? How come? Arnold Friend cried. We come out here to take you for a ride. It's Sunday. He had the voice of a man on the radio now. It was the same voice, Connie thought. Don't you know it's Sunday all day? And honey, no matter who you were with last night, today you're with Arnold Friend, and don't you forget it. Maybe you better step out here, he said, and this last was a different voice. It was a little flatter, as if the heat was finally getting to him. No, I got things to do. Hey, you two better leave. We ain't leaving until you come with us. Like hell I am. Connie, don't fool around with me. I mean, don't fool around, he said, shaking his head. He laughed incredulously. He placed his sunglasses on top of his head carefully as if he were indeed wearing a wig and brought the stems down behind his ears. Connie stared at him, another wave of dizziness and fear rising in her, so that for a moment he wasn't even in focus but was just a blur standing there against his gold car. And she had the idea that he had driven up the driveway all right, but had come from nowhere before that and belonged nowhere, and that everything about him, and even the music that was so familiar to her, was only half real. So here again, we're getting the idea that maybe it's a dream. Okay. If my father comes and sees you, he ain't coming. He's at the barbecue. How do you know that? Aunt Tilly's. Right now, they're drinking, sitting around, he said vaguely, squinting as if he were staring all the way to town and over to Aunt Tilly's backyard. Then his vision seemed to get clear, and he nodded energetically. Yeah, sitting around. There's your sister in a blue dress, huh? And high heels, the poor sad bitch. Nothing like you, sweetheart. And your mother's helping some fat woman with the corn. They're cleaning the corn, husking the corn. What fat woman? Connie cried. How do I know what fat woman? I don't know every goddamn fat woman in the world. Arnold Friend laughed. Oh, that's Mrs. Hornsby. Who invited her? Connie said. She felt a little lightheaded. Her breath was coming quickly. She's too fat. I don't like them fat. I like them the way you are, honey, he said, smiling sleepily at her. They stared at each other for a good while through the screen door. He said softly, and what you're going to do is this. You're going to come out that door. You're going to sit up front with me, and Ellie's going to sit in the back to help with Ellie, right? This isn't Ellie's date. You're my date. I'm your lover, honey. What? You're crazy. Yes, I'm your lover. You don't know what that is, but you will, he said. I know that too. I know all about you, but look, it's real nice, and you couldn't ask for nobody better than me or more polite. I always keep my word. I'll tell you how it is. I'm always nice at the first time. I'll hold you so tight, so you won't. I'll hold you so tight you won't think you have to try to get away or pretend anything because you'll know you can't. And I'll come inside you where it's all secret, and you'll give in to me, and you'll love me. So I'm going to stop right there, real fast. So the banter between Connie and Arnold went from fairly light-hearted to very dark, very fast. He truly means that he intends to have sex with Connie, and that he also intends 100% on, how do I say this nicely? Ejaculating inside of her. Yes, that's exactly what he means. Okay, now, Connie, if we remember at this point, this could all be a dream. We have no idea. It could all be a dream. Okay, or it could be real. Connie's 15, and now she suspects that Arnold Friend is about 30 because Ellie looks like he's about 40. Everything about Arnold Friend looks fake. A wig, maybe pale eyes. He's not, he's just not quite right. He's familiar, but he's not familiar. Okay, so these are all little signals as to what's to come. Okay, but now just take note that the demeanor of Arnold Friend has completely changed. He's, he bantered long enough, and he's now annoyed that Connie has not accepted his invitation, that he's seen her out and about acting, for lack of a better term, like a hussy, sleeping with different men in an alleyway or in their car at these burger joints. And now when a man approaches her, she's turning him down, and he feels very slighted by this. But she also enjoyed that power of seeking men out with her friends, and now that's not what's happening. Okay, so we'll carry on. Shut up, you're crazy, Connie said. She backed away from the door. She put her hands up against her ears as if she'd heard something terrible, something not meant for her. People don't talk like that. You're crazy, she muttered. Her heart was almost too big for her chest, and its pumping made sweat break out all over her. She looked out to see Arnold Friend pause and then take a step towards the porch, lurching. He almost fell, but like a clever drunken man, he managed to catch his balance. He wobbled in his high boots and grabbed hold of one of the porch posts. Honey, you still listening? Okay, so also, she is still inside the house. The only thing separating them is a screen door, just to, for fun. This is usually when people start screaming out, why doesn't she just shut the door? I don't know. But then again, I do know there would be no story. Get the hell out of here. Be nice, honey. Listen, I'm going to call the police. He wobbled again, and out of the side of his mouth came a fast spat curse, an aside not meant for her to hear, but even this Christ sounded forced. Then he began to smile again. She watched the smile come, awkward as if he were smiling from inside a mask. His whole face was a mask, she thought wildly, tanned down to his throat, but then running out as if he had plastered makeup on his face, but had forgotten about his throat. So I'm going to stop there again. So now he's saying, or Connie is realizing that just his face has makeup, and his neck does not. So this is back like in the 90s when we didn't learn how to blend our face into our neck. So it's very similar to that. So sorry that happened. Carrying on. Honey, listen, here's how it is. I always tell the truth, and I promise you this. I ain't coming in that house after you. You better not. I'm going to call the police if you don't, honey, he said, talking right through her voice. Honey, I'm not coming in there, but you are coming out here. You know why? She was panting. The kitchen looked like a place she had never been before. Some room she had run inside, but that wasn't good enough, wasn't going to help her. The kitchen window had never had a curtain after 3 years, and there were dishes in the sink for her to do, probably. And if you ran your hand across the table, you'd feel something sticky there. You listening, honey? Hey, I'm going to call the police. As soon as you touch the phone, I don't need to keep my promise and can come inside. You won't want that. She rushed forward and tried to lock the door. Her fingers were shaking. But why lock it? Arnold Friend said gently, talking right into her face. It's just a screen door. It's just nothing. One of his boots was at a strange angle, as if his foot wasn't in it. It pointed out to the left, bent at the angle. I mean, anybody can break through a screen door, and glass and wood and iron or anything else if he needs to. Anybody at all, especially Arnold Friend. If the place got lit up with a fire, honey, you'd come running out into my arms, right into my arms, and safe at home, like you knew I was your lover and stopped fooling around. I don't mind a nice shy girl, but I don't like no fooling around. Part of those words were spoken with a slight rhythmic lilt, and Connie somehow recognized them, the echo of a song from last year about a girl rushing into her boyfriend's arms and coming home again. Connie stood barefoot on the linoleum floor, staring at him. What do you want? She whispered. I want you, he said. What? Seen you that night and thought, that's the one. Yes, sir. I never needed to look anymore. My father's coming back. He's coming to get me. I had to wash my hair first. She spoke in a dry, rapid voice, hardly raising it for him to hear. No, your daddy is not coming. And yes, you had to wash your hair, and you washed it for me. It's nice and shining and all for me. And I thank you, sweetheart, he said with a mock bow. But again, he almost lost his balance. He had to bend and adjust his boots. Evidently, his feet did not go all the way down. The boots must have been stuffed with something so that he would seem taller. Connie stared out at him and behind him at Ellie in the car, who seemed to be looking off toward Connie's right into nothing. This Ellie said, pulling the words out of the air one after another as if he were just discovering them. You want me to pull out the phone? That's how I imagine him. Shut your mouth and keep it shut, Arnold Friend said, his face red from bending over, or maybe from embarrassment because Connie had seen his boots. This ain't none of your business. What are you doing? What do you want? Connie said. If I call the police, they'll get you. They'll arrest you. Promise was not to come in unless you touch the phone, and I'll keep that promise, he said. He resumed his erect position and tried to force his shoulders back. He sounded like a hero in a movie, declaring something important, but he spoke too loudly, and it was as if he were speaking to someone behind Connie. I ain't made plans for coming in that house where I don't belong, but just for you to come out to me the way you should be. Don't you know who I am? You're crazy, she whispered. She backed away from the door, but did not want to go into another part of the house, as if this would give him permission to come through the door. What do you... You're crazy. Huh? What are you saying, honey? Her eyes darted everywhere in the kitchen. She could not remember what it was, this room. This is how it is, honey. You come out and we'll drive away. Have a nice ride. But if you don't come out, we're going to wait till your people come home, and then they're all going to get it. You want that telephone pulled out? Ellie said. He held the radio away from his ear and grimaced, as if without the radio, the air was too much for him. I told you, shut up, Ellie, Arnold Friend said. You're deaf. Get a hearing aid, right? Fix yourself up. This little girl's no trouble and it's going to be nice to me. So, Ellie, keep to yourself. This ain't your date, right? Don't hem in on me. Don't hog. Don't crush. Don't bird dog. Don't trail me, he said in a rapid, meaningless voice, as if he were running through all the expressions he'd learned, but was no longer sure which of them was in style, then rushing on to new ones, making them up with his eyes closed. Don't crawl under my fence. Don't squeeze in my chipmunk hole. Don't sniff my glue. Suck my popsicle. Keep your own greasy fingers on yourself. He shaded his eyes and peered in at Connie, who was backed against the kitchen table. Don't mind him, honey. He's just a creep. He's a dope, right? I'm the boy for you. And like I said, you come out here nice like a lady and give me your hand and nobody else gets hurt. I mean, your nice old bald-headed daddy and your mommy and your sister in her high heels, because listen, why bring them in this? Leave me alone, Connie whispered. Hey, you know that old woman down the road, the one with the chickens and stuff, you know her? She's dead. Dead? What? You know her? Arnold Friend said. She's dead. Don't you like her? She's dead. She isn't here anymore. But don't you like her? I mean, you got something against her, some grudge or something? Then his voice dipped as if he were conscious of a rudeness. He touched the sunglasses perched on top of his head as if to make sure they were still there. Now you be a good girl. What are you going to do? Just 2 things, maybe 3, Arnold Friend said. But I promise it won't last long, and you'll like me the way you get to like people you're close to. You will. It's all over for you here, so come on out. You don't want your people in any trouble, do you? She turned and bumped against a chair or something, hurting her leg, but she ran into the back room and picked up the telephone. Something roared in her ear, a tiny roaring, and she was so sick with fear that she could do nothing but listen to it. The telephone was clammy and very heavy, and her fingers groped down the dial, but were too weak to touch it. She began to scream into the phone, into the roaring. She cried out for her mother. She felt her breath start jerking back and forth in her lungs as if it were something Arnold was stabbing her with again and again with no tenderness. A noisy, sorrowful wailing rose all about her, and she was locked inside it the way she was locked inside this house. After a while, she could hear again. She was sitting on the floor with her wet back against the wall. Arnold Friend was saying from the door, "That's a good girl. Put the phone back." So I'm going to stop right there. So now this could be interpreted as, she's having a panic attack, or the more common interpretation is that Arnold Friend entered the house because she touched the phone and raped her. And when it was over, he walked back to the door and said, "That's a good girl. Put the phone back." Okay. Now, I'm sure some of you are like, where does it say that he raped her? There it is, right here. She felt her breath start jerking back and forth in her lungs as if it were something Arnold Friend was stabbing her with again and again with no tenderness. Okay, so that's the explicit part that does not explicitly say that that's what he did, but we can interpret it that way. Okay, carrying on now. She kicked the phone away from her. "No, honey, pick it up, put it back right." She picked it up and put it back. The dial tone stopped. "That's a good girl. Now you come outside." She was hollow with what had been fear, but was now just an emptiness. All that screaming had blasted it out of her. She sat, one leg cramped under her, and deep inside her brain was something like a pinpoint of light that kept going and would not let her relax. She thought, "I'm not going to see my mother again." She thought, "I'm not going to sleep in my bed again." Her bright green blouse was all wet. Arnold Friend said in a gentle, loud voice that was like a stage voice, "The place where you came from ain't there anymore, and where you had in mind to go is canceled out. This place you are now, inside your daddy's house, is nothing but a cardboard box I can knock down any time. You know that and always did know that. You hear me?" She thought, I've got to know what to do. Go out to a nice field out in the country here where it smells so nice and sunny. Arnold Friend said, "I'll have my arms tight around you so you won't need to try to get away, and I'll show you what love is like, what it does. The hell with this house. It looks solid, all right," he said. He ran a fingernail down the screen, and the noise did not make Connie shiver as it would have the day before. "Now, put your hand on your heart, honey. You feel that? That feels solid, too, but we know better. Be nice to me. Be sweet like you can, because what else is there for a girl like you but to be sweet and pretty and give in and get away before her people come back?" She felt her pounding heart. Her hands seemed to enclose it. She thought for the first time in her life that it was nothing that was hers, that belonged to her, but just a pounding, living thing inside this body that wasn't really hers either. "You don't want them to get hurt," Arnold Friend went on. "Now, get up, honey. Get up all by yourself." She stood. "Now, turn this way. That's right. Come here over to me." "Ellie, put that away. Didn't I tell you, you dope, you miserable, creepy dope," Arnold Friend said. His words were not angry, but only part of an incantation. The incantation was kindly. "Now come out through the kitchen to me, honey, and let's see a smile. Try it. You're a brave, sweet little girl. And now they're eating corn and hot dogs cooked, bursting over an outdoor fire, and they don't know one thing about you and never did. And, honey, you're better than them, because not one of them would have done this for you." Connie felt the linoleum under her feet. It was cool. She brushed her hair back out of her eyes. Arnold Friend let go of the post tentatively and opened his arms for her, his elbows pointing toward each other and his wrists limp to show that this was an embarrassed embrace and a little mocking. He didn't want to make her self-conscious. She put out her hand against the screen. She watched herself push the door slowly open as if she were back safe somewhere in the other doorway, watching this body and this head of long hair moving out into the sunlight where Arnold Friend waited. A sweet little blue-eyed girl, he said in a half-sung sigh that had nothing to do with her brown eyes, but was taken up just the same by the vast sunlit reaches of the land behind him and on all sides of him, so much land that Connie had never seen before and did not recognize except to know that she was going to it. Hold your applause. Okay, so now let's go over some things. Okay, so here, one of the biggest interpretations of this story is that it's all a dream, that Connie is 100% dreaming this entire thing. Okay, she fell asleep after she had washed her hair and after her parents left to go to the barbecue. And this was a dream. Okay, now if we remember, everything about Connie has two sides to it. Okay, she has the part of her that wants to remain a child because she is 15. She's not, you know, even though 15 is a teenager, she's not at that maturity level yet to really be involved in anything sexual, but she's doing it anyway because she wants to be older. She wants to be more than what she appears to be. You know, that's the whole thing of everything about her has two sides. She walks different when she's at home than when she's out with her friends. When she's out with her friends, she's trying to get a guy to notice her. So she's going to probably stick out her bust and her butt a little more to get them to notice her. Now, this is what got her in trouble. Someone did notice her. So it could all be a dream, and the music is what gives us that interpretation that it could be a dream. Okay, there's constantly music playing. It's always in the background. She falls asleep listening to it. It's in, you know, Ellie and Arnold are both listening to Bobby King, which is the same station she fell asleep to. It's not something different, but most likely back then there were limited stations. So it's not that far-fetched to think that this wasn't a dream. Obviously your own interpretation is yours, and there's no right or wrong. There is no definitive, it was a dream, it wasn't a dream. Okay, but either way, she's raped. Whether it's a dream or not a dream, that's what happens. But Connie has to subconsciously realize, if it were a dream, that this is where her actions could lead her. Okay. The next thing I want to go over, I need the whiteboard for. Okay. So you guys are going to bear with my awful. Wow, this sucks. Okay, can I just do it this way? 33, 19. 17. Okay, so these are the numbers written on Arnold Friend's car. Okay, now, sorry, I'm trying to just do this with my finger. Friend. I'm running out of room. Okay, so two things that we're going to talk about right now. All right, so first we're going to talk about the name. Then we'll get to the numbers because it'll make sense if I do it that way. Okay, Arnold Friend, that's my real name. Okay, now what we're going to do is something, I like magic. Okay. Whoops, that's not what I wanted. Sorry. Okay, so I took the R's out and I moved the N a little closer and the F a little closer, and now we have an old fiend. Now, if we remember, Connie said that she recognizes that he is much older than what he keeps saying, okay? He says that he's her age, but 15-year-olds back then didn't drive, okay? So let's be honest. So he says he's 18. She realizes that he's got to be in his 30s by the mismatched makeup, the wig appearance, you know, all this stuff that makes him not look really like an 18-year-old. It's like he's trying too hard, okay? So if we take those R's out, you have an old fiend. Now, with his age, she thinks that he's in his 30s, okay? Which is this, all right? Now, he says what kind of girls he likes and that, he gives little hints that he's done this before. So we're going to assume that the 19-year-old was his first. 17-year-old was his second. And Connie just so happens to be 15. Okay, so 33, his age, 19, his first victim, 17, his second victim, and Connie is about to be the third victim. Okay, this is my favorite part of this whole story, honestly. Now, the plot thickens. The story was actually, even though it says that it was written for Bob Dylan, I'm really not quite sure why. I've been trying to there's a few different song versions of, there's a few different songs by Bob Dylan that could have inspired Oates to write this. However, what truly inspired Oates was a serial killer named Charles Schmid, okay? Love it. So Schmid, or Schmidt, I can't remember, I think it's Schmid with a D, told his best friend that he was going to, was it his girlfriend? No, I'm sorry. Charles Schmid told his girlfriend that he wanted to rape and kill her best friend. And she said, okay, like an idiot. And so that's loosely Arnold Friend. He was also called, you can look up Charles Schmid or the Pied Piper of Tucson. That was his, I don't know, his media name, I guess. So, anyway. Now, typically, if we were in class, I would show you, there is a fucking dog hair in my mouth and it's killing me. I would show you a clip, but what I'm going to do instead is just show you the website for it, and then you guys can watch it on your own if you really want to. I'm not gonna, I don't know if I can stay up for half an hour, mostly because I'm just exhausted. So there was a movie based off of this story called Smooth Talk. It was done in the 80s, 1985. Okay. You can find it for free online. Yes, it's called Smooth Talk. Oh, what did I do? What did I do? What did I do? There it is. Sorry. Okay, it's this one, Smooth Talk, 1985, full movie. Okay. Now you'll notice Laura Dern as the lady in Jurassic Park, the original, and Treaty. Oh God, what's his name? Treaty Williams, Treaty something. He's in Miss Congeniality. That's what I know. Okay, so Smooth Talk. You do not need to watch the entire thing to get this point of the story. Okay, just bear with me. It is probably the last half an hour of it is this story is more closely related. Okay, so that's what I would look for if you want a visual interpretation of it. It does a very good job at being incredibly accurate to the story. Okay, so Smooth Talk, 1985. Just type in Smooth Talk free online. It'll pop up. The last half an hour, so the last 30 minutes of it are this story. Okay, I think that's about it. This is 100% one of my favorite stories. I'm sorry if you didn't enjoy it. I just enjoy it because there's a lot of interpretation, a lot of inferring that has to be done, and that Oates is just so wonderful at subtly putting in these details that you wouldn't pick up, and that it has two different options of how we can interpret this. It's either completely a dream or it's real. So I wonder how you guys interpreted this. Let me know. I don't know. I miss you guys. That's all I got. So I hope you liked it. I hope you liked my somewhat dramatic reading, but I guess we'll see. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good rest of your whatever day it is. Bye, guys.